So I think one of the hardest parts of being a researcher is trying to figure out how to analyze data and to make sense of data. So I was working on this hard problem today where I've got this data set. It's a text file and there's 1 billion characters in it. There's over 13 million observations that are in this text file. So I work with adverse event data in the medical device industry. And it's pretty frustrating because there is 1 or 2 characters in the entire data set that's throwing off the ability to analyze this. And I was thinking about how difficult of a challenge this actually is when you start to think about you're analyzing billions of data points. And a lot of people don't really understand how challenging it actually is to go and make sense of this. Now you might be thinking, wouldn't it be just easier to pay somebody else to go do this? Well, that is true. However, there is a search cost that's involved in trying to find people that are actually competent enough to be able to do this. And then you might be thinking, well, how come you just don't get some sort of software that exists? Well, again, we don't necessarily know what software to use. There's often software that's available, right? So for example, Python might be a little better than what I'm using right now. I use Stata to do a lot of this. It's a statistical software. It works pretty good for some of these things. And the trouble is that even when you get to those, you learn, so there's often a cost to learn how to analyze, use those different kinds of software. And I know lots of different kinds of programming language and software and things like that I've worked with all of them. And they're all kind of essentially the same thing. When you go and work with those various different software, you realize that they themselves have limitations that you can't possibly solve. And then you run into the same problems and the same difficulties as you are looking for different alternatives. So often there's not necessarily one best answer how to do this, and it's not easy to actually figure out what is the best way or the best possible analytical technique to do anything. So as researchers, we tend to kind of be lost all the time, right? We don't know what the right answer is. And then the reason is you're always doing it for the first time. There's never a time where you're kind of going through the motions unless you're doing research. I don't know what I'm doing. I always find that I'm doing the same thing. I might be doing something similar, but it's always the first time. This data that I'm analyzing, I've analyzed this data hundreds of, probably even thousands of times, but because it's being read in, it's new data that's coming in from 2021. There is, new information that's going in there. Some of the records that are from 2021 are worded in a slightly different way because I'm working with data in which people from all around the world, from different countries, input into the data source. So it makes it just challenging to understand what you should do. So I'm going to point out that I don't think there is a right answer in terms of what to do, other than just become familiar with what we're doing. But this is actually just the real challenge of what we actually have to handle as researchers. There's just a great deal of uncertainty in terms of what is the best possible thing to do. Now, the whole reciprocity project began as me trying to solve this problem. I've got these large data sets and I want to make sure that I can clean them adequately at some point. And I'm slowly building this thing out because I think it could be very, very useful for anybody that's analyzing text data or could use work or can use some help on their writing. So I want to actually build some of these features in there. However, it's cost an awful lot of money and it's not easy to even find the developers to put these things together. Not everybody has the capability. And then at the same time, I have to continuously work with the same people because they themselves need to understand what the code is. Right, so it's a challenging problem, and there's no straight answers, is what I'm pointing out. And if I think the identification of somebody that is an expert in any particular domain, some sort of research expert or an expert, they're going to recognize that there's lots of nuances and there's a lot of problems than what you'd probably identify as you go into it. A novice is going to say, well, that's easy. Why don't you just do this, this, and this? It's when you actually get into it, you realize all of these different kind of nuances, and you don't necessarily, which you took for granted of going into it. This is what it means to be an expert, is you start to realize that things that seem simple and easy on the outside are actually really, really tough problems. And these really tough problems can be tackled, but you have to do it one step at a time. So that's the only thing that I can recommend for you to do, is to not be afraid of doing some of these challenging problems and stepping into it, but then realizing it just takes one step every single day. And what you're doing is trying to find that one character, for example, in the billions of billions of observations or billions of characters that's out there in data sets. But what you're trying to do is just systematically step through it, step by step by step. And so if I can get you to whittle down whatever you're working on and think about it in a systematic fashion, to go slow, to make your problem simple, and then from there you can often go really quickly and expand in more complex problems. So experts will tend to do that. They'll focus on something that's really tiny and really simple, and then from there you will expand and become more challenging or go into different directions. There's just one way to deal with the complexity of the world. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. I still got to find that problem. I still have to find that character, and it's driving me bananas. All right, take care. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.